Hello and welcome to the fourth episode of the Beer Talkers, the podcast where we bring you news and views on the world of beer and brewing. I'm Sam Hill.
And I'm Sophie Atherton. Together we are the Beer Talkers, and for this episode we've decided to stage a face-off. So it's cider, the appley stuff,
May also include pears and other fruit or fruit flavours.
versus beer, the hoppy malty stuff.
Flavours may vary and may also be produced by yeast or additional ingredients, including, but not restricted to, fruits, spices, herbs and flowers.
So partly we wanted to have a bit of fun with our show topic, but we also chose it because there's been a lot of stories over the last couple of years, and over the last few months as well, about how cider sales are rising and that cider's even catching up with beer. And we wondered whether it's really fair to sort of make that comparison in those stories.
So seeing as we've been enjoying some hot and sunny weather, we thought we'd let cider and beer battle it out and see who's king or queen of the summer drinks.
Or any season, really. So we'll be tasting a Flemish red ale.
Which we chose really because it kind of has some of the same characteristics as a cider, so slightly appley notes, and also because it's refreshing and quite sour as well.
And we have two ciders from Oliver's Ciders, which have been recommended to us as suitable for beer drinkers coming across to cider.
And while we're recording the show, we're both doing a hopped cider experiment.
Indeed we are. We have our cafetières at the ready, with plans to infuse a bog-standard mass-market cider with hops.
That's right, we've opted for Bulmers Original Cider, and we're going to give it a little taste before we hop it too. And we've got some Kohatu hops, which are a New Zealand variety, supposed to have a lot of citrus and pine flavours, which we really thought would enhance the characteristics of the Bulmers.
They sound rather amazing, and they do smell quite amazing too, because Sam has also sent some to me, so we can both test whether hopped cider is the drink of the future or indeed a terrible mistake.
Given that we normally only taste 2 beers per show, we seem to be having rather a lot to drink this episode, don't we?
We'd best take it steady then. Glasses of water at the ready?
Glass of water at the ready.
Excellent. So before we talk through our views, and in my case, prejudices about cider, shall we have a little sip of the Bulmers and get started on the hopping after that? So these bottles come with a sort of nice foil around the top. I don't know whether that's any benefit to the contents, but it makes them look sort of quite nice, I suppose.
Oh.
Just pouring my... I'm laughing because I've heard Sam's reaction already. He's much quicker off the draw than I am. I'm just pouring a little bit of mine into a Nonic, which is a sort of straight glass with a little bump in it, and smells like cider. I always think cider looks like it's a lovely, it looks a lovely colour, and it tastes like
fizzy apple juice.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It also doesn't... I don't know how strong it is. Let's have a quick look on the bottle. This is 4.5%. To me, it tastes a lot weaker than that.
But it fits right into that, kind of almost, refreshing, soft nothing drink for... And
it's like a lager, but with apple flavour.
It's kind of bland, and it fits perfectly into the whole idea of millions of people swilling cider this summer, sat in a field listening to rock bands. So I'm not going to drink any more of that, because this really doesn't show the best of what cider can offer. And if we're trying to persuade you, Soph, that maybe there is some cider out there for you, then this isn't the way to go.
I'll reserve judgment, but so far this was sort of relatively inoffensive, I would say. So, though I'm not desperately keen on the taste of apples. So, right, talk us through what we're going to be doing with this hopping then.
Well, do you have your cafetiere ready and to hand?
Right, I do.
So I grab a fistful of hops.
A fistful of hops. That's like a Western, isn't it? Okay.
Into the cafetiere and slowly pour the cider on top.
And you warned me prior to us coming on air, as it were, to take it slowly because it might fizz up like a crazy thing. Brown glass bottle, this one. Not so important with cider, with no hop oils actually resident in it as it's made. It's fizzing a fair bit. What's yours doing? You're actually. Should we let on? Should we let on that there's a different method?
Well, I didn't have a cafetiere which I could use, so I've gone for a bowl and and what's called a hop bag, which is just a small kind of cloth bag for keeping for putting hops in when you're doing a home brew.
So mine at the moment, I've tipped in I don't know, about 2 inches of cider, and my hops are sitting on the top.
Ah, okay. So what you'll probably have to do is when you put the plunger on, just push the hops down slightly below the surface of the cider.
And then, yes, because I don't have a stirring implement to hand, but it's not too fizzy at the moment, so I'm going to put a bit more in and see what happens. But it is fizzing up a little bit. I've done about 2/3 of the bottle. I think I'm going to leave it at that and put the and follow your instructions that you've just given me. Okay, so that's starting to infuse. It's looking quite interesting in there. That's all I can say about it, really, and I'll just put it over, put it well away from the recording equipment. And we'll have a taste of that later in the show and see whether it's improved it at all, whether it's imparted any wonderful hoppiness, or whether indeed it is just a horrible mistake. Now, I suppose I'd better confess, you might have already guessed this, that I'm firmly in beer's corner here because although the descriptions we've been sent of the Tom Oliver's cider do sound really very genuinely enticing, and I'm looking forward to tasting them, the thing that actually puts me off cider is that it tastes of apples.
Well, that's the battle lost, really, isn't it, if you're the judge?
Well, I'm prepared to reserve judgment and give it a go, but I also ought to tell you that I did used to drink cider back in my teens and a little bit beyond that, if the truth be told. But what I feel really is that my palate grew out of it, like growing out of having a sweet tooth. And it's almost as if I graduated to beer.
Well, I grew up in the West Country, and so yeah, I definitely had a lot of cider before I probably should have done. But I think, like with beer, where you may start with a kind of a beer with less flavour, maybe a mass market lager or something, and then graduate onto something with a little more flavour. Ciders are the same. I mean, there are very mature tasting ciders, so oak aged and things like that, and I think there really is, so there is a wider kind of spectrum of flavours than you may think with cider. It's not just fizzy apple juice.
I think that's heartening for me because obviously this is a light-hearted episode of the Beer Talkers, but I like to be open-minded, but I will just add that of course my kind of falling out with cider could have something to do with the fact that there was a night where I overindulged, puked in a litter bin, and accidentally used the F word in front of my father.
So for you, it's a personal thing, and that's a story I think lots of people have with cider and where they fell out with cider. So cider really is a victim of never again after one too many.
Indeed, it certainly has been. I think there's certainly an element of truth there for me. But so, what about you, Sam? You were saying you're a West Country boy. You have liked the cider in the past, and I know that when we were at the London Drinker trade session earlier in the year, you were drinking something which I think you did manage to persuade me to taste. But where do you stand on cider?
Well, there were a couple of cider makers in my village when I was growing up, and there used to be plenty going around at harvest festivals and things like that. So. I really like it. The one which we had at London Drinker, which was a very interesting cider. It's one of the few ciders, it may well even be the only cider, which is made within the M25, called, I think it's called London Glider. And they make that by effectively scrumping apples from people's back gardens, or rather taking donations of apples. And that's a fantastic example of cider.
Sorry. Thieves cider.
Well, that's the traditional way of doing it in the West Country, anyway. Get off my land.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you off.
So yeah, that was a great example of a cider with some very interesting flavours, and that was a bit like apple juice, but in a very good way. So very refreshing and really tasting the kind of different varieties of apples they had in there.
I can see where you're coming from because I'm sort of now thinking of, times when I've been given some kind of artisan, if you like, for want of a better expression, apple juice, and it has been really tasty, and you can tell that that it's been made with some kind of variety of apple that's got different flavours than you might expect, and it is, it's quite astringent and quite tasty, but still, I wouldn't want to drink very much of it. I'm just kind of thinking, oh yeah, this is a bit of appley stuff. It's quite nice for this small glass that I've got, but I'm never going to, go back and try and hunt it down and have some more.
Well, yeah. Well, at least we can maybe get you to try a few different ones today and see if you would drink any more of them.
Shall we have a cider then?
Yeah, why not? Well, something a bit better than the Bulmers, I think.
I certainly hope so. I certainly believe so. So the first cider we're going to try is from Oliver's Cider, and it's a posh scrumpy, and it's a dry cider, and it's presented in a beautiful champagne style bottle with a champagne style cork. It's 6.2%, and it's a bittersweet bottle conditioned cider. So I'm going to battle with this cork now. I think it'll be just like opening champagne, won't it?
Oh.
And as usual, Sam is already in there. And I've got sore fingers today, so I'm just battling with this wire cage. And I feel like I've got entirely the wrong glasses for this. I'm also sometimes a little bit afraid of opening this sort of bottle. Okay, so we've got some cider in front of us, and this is new territory really for me, or old territory if you prefer. This to me, I do think cider is a lovely colour. Apples do impart this beautiful golden colour to the drink. This is somewhat cloudy, presumably because of the bottle conditioning. The bubbles are rising quite fast.
Yeah, it's a very fine set of bubbles, almost like champagne.
No foam though. I was expecting more foam. I'm giving it a little swirl to see what I can get, and there's no head, and that's probably one of the things that makes me go, no, what, no, because it's got no head. But I'm going to drink it now because obviously I'm just being a wuss and I haven't dived in.
There's not many ciders which will give you a head. A head. There's not much stuff in there to give head retention. You can instantly taste the difference between this and the Bulmers, and smell it rather as well. It's got a kind of a really nice woody, oaky flavour.
Well, I have to say this is a million miles from the Bulmers, and doesn't taste, like smacking you in the face of apples. You can tell that the underlying flavour is obviously apples, but it's got. Oh, I know it's a cop-out to say this, and I'm waiting for my brain to catch up with my mouth. It's very complex.
It is very complex and deep. And it lasts in the mouth afterwards as well. It's lovely.
It does remind me a bit of a Gers.
Yeah, and you've got that little bit of bitterness there as well, which kind of is what us beer lovers like about a lot of beers.
I think that were Gers not such a, obviously sour taste, if Gers were sweet, it might taste like this. There's a very medicinal. I hesitate to say the word phenolic because that's a bit of a jargony word, isn't it?
Well, I think the medicinal character comes from probably the skins of the apples and also from the oak barrels that it's aged in. I think it's aged in oak anyway. Did we say it was?
I'm not sure now.
And what the apples and the oak will give is what you'll hear a lot in the wine world, which is tannins, which are the kind of slightly astringent, bitter flavours, and that really offsets the sweetness from the apple as well. I think it's and also makes it last a long time in the mouth.
I don't like the smell of this.
No.
Just taking a step back to the aroma, because you've spoken about the aroma and I haven't because I keep putting my nose in here and finding it
barnyardy.
Yeah.
Sulphury.
A bit farmyard, a little bit rubbery actually.
A bit rubbery.
And I don't think I don't mean that as a criticism of the drink, because what I can tell of this is it's a very carefully made product. I mean, has got this amazing dry finish, and it has succeeded, I think, in modern times, my modern times, as being a cider that actually I would voluntarily drink. And I'd go further than that and say, if somebody told me that this was available, and it was a hot day, and I was having the right food, I'd probably say, yeah, oh yes, please, I'll have some of this.
I would have it anytime.
So that is Oliver's Posh Scrumpy, and we will put details of the cider and everything we've tasted today. We will put up on the show notes.
As a kind of a comeback from the beer world, I've chosen another beer, which is also aged in oak. It's a Flanders red ale called Duchesse de Bourgogne. And this is a very interesting beer because it's a sour beer, but it's been, after souring, it gets mixed back in with some younger beer, which adds back in some sweetness. And it really has a fascinating kind of flavour profile, which I hope you enjoy. Have you tasted this before, Sophie?
I think I might have had a little taste of this, possibly when I was doing my beer sommelier training, but not ever actually had the opportunity to. I know it has a reputation amongst people who know about beer as being a very special beer and a beer that you should try before you die, if you like.
Yeah, it's very unique, and well, you can tell it's unique as soon as you look at the bottle, because it's a rather elegant lady holding a bird, an old painting, I presume, a Dutch or Flemish painting that graces the label. The Duchess herself, I presume.
I would much prefer it. I mean, presumably this is some kind of painting that the brewery has gained permission to use. But what would improve it for me was if she was holding a glass of the beer. Should we dive in?
Yeah, let's.
Because this is not only beer versus cider, this is the boozy edition of the Beer Talkers.
Now there's your head.
Oh, that's a beautiful colour. And it has, as you say, got a wonderful head. A very, a moussey head, slightly creamy looking. And the beer itself is a rich red colour. Looks very special. I've got mine in a sort of wine goblet. I'm not sure whether that's the best glass for it, Sam, as it seems like a beer you're familiar with.
I don't know, actually. I've only ever had it in this country, so I'm sure if you had it in Belgium, they'd give you a branded glass of exactly the right shape and dimensions to highlight the beer.
It's got a very, very woody aroma, hasn't it? Not what I was expecting, actually. It's got a quite wine-like quality to it, and although it's it's meant to be a sour beer, it's not as sour as some. It's got a definite sweetness to it, with an almost grapey edge.
Yeah.
I'm still not sure whether I've tried this before. I think if I've tried it, I've only had the merest mouthful of it. I think this is now a beer that I will be actually trying to use to entice wine drinkers to beer.
It's a very unique beer, and yeah, when you were saying it's a sour beer, but it's not done in the. I don't really know how geeky to get here, but it's not done in the kind of the Gers or lambic fashion. It's done in a slightly different method.
It's a beer that's making me very thoughtful.
Right, and what?
You know, when you have a beer and what I call a dancing beer, and you have a taste of it, and you just think, "Whoa, this is amazing!" And we've done this with some of the beers that we've tasted for the Beer Talkers. It's not that for me, but it makes me want to study it.
Yeah.
It makes me want to drink it because it's so unusual.
Yeah, and I find with each mouthful, I'm just trying to work it out.
Exactly. You've hit the nail on the head. It's a beer that wants to be worked out. It's a beer that's a bit like a puzzle.
Yeah, it's certainly puzzling, but I love it personally. I love it, but do you see why I picked it as maybe a foil for cider?
Yes.
As something Yeah.
Yes, I do. I do. It's got that similar mouthfeel, and it's got those, as you say, almost appley flavours. They're feeling more, and it's tasting more appley. Actually, the more I drink it, felt grapey at first, but I'm getting that sort of astringency on the side of the tongue. It tastes very red, if that doesn't sound crazy.
It does, yeah.
And I can imagine actually that this would be absolutely amazing to have with food if you were having a really rich roast pork.
Oh yeah, yeah. I can see that.
To be honest, I feel like it's crying out for a meal, rather than being the kind of thing that you would just order and drink. But drink as a standalone drink. But you may view it differently.
When I see it, I order it because because I love it so much. But you're right. With pork or something like that, so it would be fantastic, definitely.
So it's the Duchesse de Bourgogne. Other pronunciations may be available, and it's it's from Brewery Verhaeghe. I believe we decided it was pronounced, and it's a Flemish red ale. It's 6.2%. Although this is a kind of boozy edition of the show where we're having a bit more fun, we do usually like to look outside of ourselves and talk to somebody else, talk to others, and find out what their views on the topic that we're covering is. And to this end, I thought we would have a chat with Pete Brown, who has recently published a book on cider. And let's hear what he had to say. Joining us down the line for the Beer Talkers is arguably the best-known beer writer in the UK, Pete Brown. Now, you might expect us to be asking him to take beer's side, but he's actually just published a book on cider. And Pete, I think you have another cider book due out later this year, don't you?
Yes, we've just published the Welsh Guide to Cider and Perry, which is kind of a small project compared to other things, but it's the first time that Wales's very exciting cider scene has been documented. And then that's kind of a forerunner to the big one, which is coming out in October, which is World's Best Cider. And it's the first time that anyone's actually looked at cider from a global perspective and done the big sort of illustrated book job on it that we're so familiar with in things like beer and wine.
So, I mean, I think that it is a first, and that it's now being published. It really demonstrates what we've been talking about, which is cider's got this, it's enjoying this wave of popularity, and we keep hearing about its recession-busting sales figures. And this year it returned for the first time in decades as a category at the International Brewing Awards, which many call the Beer Oscars. Do you think that all that means it's capable of taking beer's crown?
No, not at all. I think they're complementary, and beer is always my first love. I drink a lot of cider when it's hot, like it is at the moment. I think cider is a brilliant kind of first drink of the evening, and it works very well in that respect. It also works really well because it's more unisex than beer is. It's got much more sort of cross-gender appeal than beer does. There are more people actually drinking cider now than there are beer, but all those people drink cider in much lower volumes than they drink beer. I think beer is much more sessionable. It's much more it's much easier to drink several pints of it. Whereas cider, I think, belongs somewhere between beer and wine as something that you drink in smaller quantities, really.
What do you think's behind the kind of surge in interest? You've already sort of touched on it there and said it's got a unisex appeal, but do you think there is a sort of definable reason behind it, or there was a definable moment when it suddenly sort of became this sort of very popular drink?
Yeah, I mean, everyone in the cider industry talks about the Magners effect, and you can't overstate that. Cider had got to the point where it was just not relevant to most people. It just wasn't considered as an option. And then when Magners had this brilliant idea to kind of serve it in a pint glass over ice, people just kind of saw it and said, "Oh, I want one of those. That looks amazing." What it is, but I'm having it. And it really made cider look attractive again to a whole new generation. And everybody, down to the craft producers in places like Somerset, will say that had the biggest impact on their sales. It represented cider as a stylish modern drink, and things like Magners and Bulmers aren't everyone's cup of tea, but they've led to interest in much more sort of craft created stuff.
So what's your verdict in the face-off then? You've already touched on this, but it's a blistering hot day. You've got a pub garden in your sights. Is it going to be cider or beer?
It depends on the range. The issue I've got at the moment is that a lot of most pubs don't serve the good stuff. If I'm left with a choice between kind of commercial cider or a decent craft beer, I would take the beer. If they'd got the good ciders in, I would definitely go for the cider on a day like this. It's just irresistible. As I say, for me, beer cider rather is kind of like a low. I don't judge it as a sort of stronger, sweeter alternative to beer. I judge it as a lower alcohol alternative to wine. It's made from fruit. The trick to it, the character of it, is in the blend of different varieties, just as it would be with grape varieties. And it's cold, it's refreshing, it's acidic, it's sharp. And if it's got the structure and the complexity to go with that, then I think sometimes it's a superior drink to wine, and you can drink a lot more of it.
Pete Brown, thanks for joining us on The Beer.
No worries.
So we're tasting some high quality ciders for this show. Well, Bulmer's excluded from that. But the rocketing kind of cider sales in this country are partially affected by a new kind of range of ciders which include fruit flavours. I've tried a few of these, and I must admit they're not really for me. They seem a little bit like Alka Pops for adults, but what do you think about that, Sophie?
You've just implied that Alka Pops are for children. But which I think is spot on. But obviously, in the name of responsible drinking, alcohol should not be consumed by children, and it's not legal for them to do so on licensed premises. What do I think about that? Actually, despite my distaste for cider generally, I did happen to have one of those fruit flavour ciders the other day, because one of my a young person that I know, who is old enough to drink, I should add, has quite a liking for them. And we were in a pub. Now, I can't name the cider, and I'm not doing it to be woolly. I'm doing it because I can't remember which one it was, but there are two Swedish brands, and it was one of them. It was more than £4 a bottle, if I remember correctly.
Wow.
And she ordered, she said, could she have one? And I said, yeah, that's fine. You can have that. And out it came, and it was poured. And she tasted it, and she thought it was disgusting, and didn't want to drink it. And I didn't. I tried not to balk at the fact that I just spent more than £4 on it. And then I tasted it, and it was. If you remember in your youth, when if your parents did the same as my parents did, they bought their own brand fizzy drinks in the supermarket.
Yeah.
And when the sugar-free ones came in, which are actually littered with artificial sweeteners, and always had that kind of funny, powdery, slightly chemical taste to them, that is what this drink, this fruit-flavoured cider, tasted like to me. I thought it was revolting.
Yeah. They're a bit like cheap shower gel, I think, as well, sometimes.
Which might taste better.
Might do. More of a head on it, anyway.
That's for sure. That's for sure. It's all in the head. So it's not for us to tell other people what to drink. We talk about drinks, and we talk about drinks from our own point of view. And we, to an extent, on the Beer Talkers, we examine views on drinks and debates about drinks. But to me, and I'm not speaking about any particular brand, I'm speaking in a broad sense. If you put some kind of fruity flavour, artificial flavour, or even sort of natural flavour into a cider, and then sort of try and say that it's this, very crafted, handmade product, and I think that's a bit of a swizz. And I think, like you say, I think they're just like Alka Pops, really. And I think if you don't like alcohol, don't drink it.
Okay, you're listening to the Beer Talkers podcast, and this month we're talking about beer and cider. But before we carry on, we should tell you about how you can get in touch with us.
Yes, because we want to hear your views on beer versus cider. What's your favourite? Do you like both? Are we completely nuts? Actually, don't answer that one. So, but all the same, tweet us at The Beer Talkers.
And if you've not come to us via our website, you can find show notes, including details and pictures of the beers and ciders we've tasted on this edition of the programme, by visiting www.thebeertalkers.com.
So, we should do our second cider. Actually, technically speaking, it's our third cider. We should do that, shouldn't we?
It is. I'm looking at this hopped cider sat beside me with a little bit of dread, actually.
I'm glad you're looking at it with dread. Mine looks absolutely horrible. But what doesn't look... He's having hysterics now. But what doesn't look horrible is this other lovely bottle of Oliver's cider that we have here, which is called Bittersweet Funk Dry Cider.
I'm having a look at the label now, and it's a bittersweet and bitter sharp cider from 2011, and it's made with wild yeasts, which is where I'm guessing this funk is coming from.
Sounds very exciting, very, very exciting. This is not in a champagne bottle. This is in a clear glass bottle with a good old-fashioned plastic top, which we're opening up now. It's got a nice label. It's got a quite funky label in a different kind of way. Oh, it pours nicely.
It pours nicely, and there's seems to be absolutely no carbonation at all. So this is a still cider, very much in the traditional cider vein.
And this one is 6.9%. Smells much more like you would expect a cider to smell than the Posh Scrumpy.
With a lot of wood on there again, a lot of oak.
Yeah, if I put my nose right in, I'm getting the hints of wood, but I'm not getting it perhaps as strongly as you are.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's dry.
That is very dry. It's making me want to make an inappropriate remark, an inappropriate euphemism for dryness, which I won't make. I'll leave to your imagination, beer listeners, cider listeners.
Wow. I mean, it's I really like it. This is what I think of when I think of traditional cider. It's astringent. It's sour. It doesn't sound very appealing, I know, but it really is. It really is lovely. But although it doesn't have the kind of apple juice characters of which you don't appreciate. So for these other kind of astringent characters, are they putting you off as well?
No, they're not putting me off. Actually, I think that the dryness of this is. I'm trying to think of a way that doesn't make it sound unpleasant. The dryness is. Incredibly appealing. This does remind me, it's brought back a memory for me actually, because I'd said I drank cider in my teens, but actually when I was a wee child, my parents were fairly progressive in their thinking about alcohol, and we were allowed to have a little tiny glass, little egg cupful of whatever my dad was drinking on a Sunday, and by which I don't mean he used to give us an egg cup full of spirits or something like that, because that would be crazy to give that to a 5-year-old.
Very irresponsible.
Very irresponsible. But he mostly drank cider at Sunday lunchtime, and this reminds me of that. I've been and my parents, not to be all morbid, my parents are no longer with us. I've probably mentioned that before, but I'm suddenly back in my house where I grew up in just outside West London on a Sunday lunchtime, drinking cider with my folks, and it's really rather nice.
Lovely.
And I think this is a stunning cider. It's so dry, and obviously it does have an apple flavour because it's made with apples, but I don't know enough about cider to really do it justice. I think I don't know how to describe it, because the apple flavour is transformed, presumably by these wild yeasts and the aging process, into something just very, very special. And I've said some very disparaging things about cider. I think maybe there's cider and there's cider. And I wouldn't say disparaging things about this cider. I think this is a marvellous drink. I prefer this actually to the Posh Scrumpy.
Well, this exemplifies what I mean by mature flavours. I can't imagine my teenage self enjoying this very much. I probably think it was off. And just to go back to one of the points, this is made with 100% cider apples, and cider apples do have they are very sour You wouldn't ever eat them raw, or even cook with them, and they are purely for the purpose of making a drink like this.
I think we could go into raptures further, but in the essence of broadcasting, so to speak, or podcasting rather, succinctness, it's
Is it that time?
It's that time. I'm hysterical now because we've had this amazing cider from Oliver's Cider, and now we have to go back to this horrible, what looks like a horrible experiment in a jar, which is the hopped cider. Will it be any good?
The Witch's Brew.
The Witch's Brew. I think witches would make something far more enticing, unless they were cursing somebody. The Witch's Curse. Okay. Sam's messing with his hop bag, and I'm going to plunge. And I'm going to plunge my cafetiere.
It smells of hops and cider, which should smell nice, but it doesn't. Oh, man. Oh, I think I might. Oh.
I'm sorry, beer listeners, cider listeners. We are not drunk. We are just hysterical because we thought this would be a really good idea. And how wrong can two people be? It stinks.
It smells of
old
hops. Okay. I managed to wring a pint out of, almost a pint out of this.
Anyway, bottoms up.
It's not that bad. It's just not very nice. It's got all the boring apple flavour of the Bulmers with a slightly bitter, astringent, vegetable-y hop flavour going on.
I think it tastes better than it tasted before. It looks horrible. It doesn't look so horrible actually once you pour it and put it in the glass. In my opinion, to call this Bulmers Original cider and put it next to the other two ciders we've tasted, it doesn't deserve the name cider. I mean, I thought that it was going to have some kind of amazing effect. Maybe we should have used more hops, although it looks like I've used quite a lot of hops. Maybe we should have infused it for longer. And maybe that's an experiment for the future, actually, with a kind of mini podcast of the results.
My opinion now I've had a few mouthfuls. One of the problems with it is, well, depending on how you like your cider, it's gone completely flat for me. But the more I drink it, the more I'm actually enjoying it, and it's kind of got a flavour of like an iced tea or something like that.
It has gone completely flat, and that inevitably will have had an effect on the flavour, but it almost tastes a bit more like a perry.
I think it almost shows that if someone spent enough time and patience brewing cider with hops, or even dry hopping cider, it could work. I think it could work. I think there are some breweries or some cider makers rather in the States that have tried this that I believe I came across when I was doing a little bit of research for this show. Unfortunately, I can't remember any of the details at all. Okay, well, maybe we can look those up and pop them in the show notes.
Yes, I'm sure we can find them, and then people will be able to at least have a look at what the hell it is I'm talking about.
But I think I won't go on for too much longer about this, but I think one thing that cider, like as we've tasted in the Bittersweet Funk, it actually has some of the characters which hops would lend it, so bitterness and astringency, which maybe they've just never really seen the point in adding hops. And the other thing is that cider is generally so acidic that it kind of preserves itself.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think what came to mind for me was in the sort of current climate, in the sort of, if you like, beer revolution that we're in, and perhaps a bit of a cider revolution as well, because it is enjoying more heightened popularity, and not just the fruit flavour ciders that we made disparaging comments about, but craft cider, if you like. I thought with all that going on that there might be somebody out there that said, right, I'm going to try putting some hops in this and see what it's like. Maybe somebody will come out of the woodwork because they've given it a go and we don't know about it. But like you say, I think I expected this experiment. Obviously, I had really grand kind of optimism about it. I expected this experiment to create a really kind of tasty drink that would make me go, oh, yes, it's much better with hops in. Whereas instead, I have gone straight back to the bittersweet funk dry cider to take away the taste of our experiment.
Whereas I'm halfway through my pint now of the hop cider, and I'm beginning to enjoy it.
Because you's a West Country boy. Okay, so I suppose the moment of truth now is upon us. Is it possible for us to declare a winner in the battle that has been beer versus cider?
Well, I honestly think that if we were basing it purely on the beer and the ciders we've tasted today, and we exclude our experiment, that cider would probably win this battle.
And do you know what? I'm going to agree with you.
Wow.
Because as much as I appreciate the Duchesse de Bourgogne, I think it's very much a food beer. And if I had to pick of the three, as you say, excluding our disastrous experiment, if I had to pick of the three, I'd definitely go for this bitter sweet funk dry cider. And on that basis, I would declare that of this very small battle that we've staged today, that cider has won.
On that bombshell, we've been the Beer Talkers.
Thanks for being the beer listeners.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.